Welcome back to the Connection program. This is lesson 2, Emoting. The more emotion you express with your facial expressions and tonality, the more engaged you become to other people. People who have trouble holding the attention of others generally have a problem not emoting enough or not showing enough emotion. We start with emoting in this program because it's typically one of the quickest and easiest fixes to help guys become more engaging and connect well with others. The first part of emoting is facial expression. There are 6 classic facial expressions that have been studied or characterized under psychology: joy, sadness, surprise, confusion, disgust, and anger. Every facial expression you make is some sort of variation of one of these different 6 facial expressions. Your facial expression demonstrates the emotional intensity of your message, and if you're not showing much emotional intensity, then people are going to empathize less with what you're saying and therefore empathize less with you or feel less invested in you. So here are the 6 examples of 6 different facial expressions and emotions. Obviously this guy's a little bit over the top, kind of hamming it up a little bit to make it a little more obvious, but you should be able to look at each one without having to read the description under it and understand which facial expression he's doing. Let's talk about vocal volume. It's almost impossible to be too loud. Now the goal, you don't want to shout at people, you don't want to scream at people, but you want to be loud and clear. You want to use your vocal range to its greatest extent. Most passive men speak way too quietly, and the quieter you speak, the harder you become to listen to, the less dominant you sound, and the less engaging you become. So part of the exercises of this lesson are going to have to do with speaking loudly and clearly. And finally, let's talk about vocal tonality. Another problem that a lot of unengaging, uncharismatic people have is that they use a very submissive vocal tonality. And submissive vocal tonalities have a characteristic of always looking for approval or always looking for some sort of validation to what's being said. And what happens with submissive vocal tonalities is generally at the end of each sentence or at the end of each word, the tone intonation goes up. So to use an example of submissive vocal tonality is to talk to people like this. You know what I'm saying? Do you understand what I'm saying when I talk about submissive vocal tonality? At the end of each of my sentences or each of my words, my voice rises. It rises like that, and it gives kind of this, I don't know, it makes you sound like a pussy, basically. And this is a bad habit of a lot of people or a lot of men who aren't able to engage in a very strong or authoritative way. The opposite is obviously a dominant vocal tonality, which is characterized by your tonality going down at the end of each sentence, like this. Because when you are a dominant person, people want to listen to you more. Now you can feel the difference there. It almost sounds like I'm like commanding you or yelling at you. It's a much more powerful way of speaking, and it's a subtle thing that takes a little bit of work to get used to, but when you start implementing it into your speech more often, you'll notice that people pay more attention, people are more engaged, people give you a lot more credit, they don't walk over you as much, they care about your opinion a lot more. So it's a very, very useful but simple habit to get into, and especially combined with volume, a good volume, and you'll really start to notice people responding to you in different ways. So today's exercise, to start out, I want you to practice each of the 6 facial expressions in the mirror. And while you practice these facial expressions, I want you to speak loudly and practice a dominant vocal tonality. Now, this is going to feel really weird at first. You can say whatever you want, but the point's to practice expressing the emotions, the facial expressions, along with the emotions. So an example of, if I wanted to express anger, I might sit there in the mirror and, put my angry face on and say, I'm really pissed off at you right now. Why didn't you call me back? Or something like that. Just make up something stupid or silly that allows you the chance to practice and exercise the emotion when you're standing in front of the mirror. Now, yes, it's going to feel weird. Yeah, you're going to feel a little silly. Yeah, it feels weird to stare at yourself talking for 5-10 minutes at a time. But do it until it feels comfortable. Do it until the facial expressions and the vocal tonalities feel somewhat comfortable. And you'll notice how much more exciting and dynamic you start to look and sound. Now, once you've done that, I want you to go out and spend the day and consciously practice using more facial expressions and tonality in your day-to-day conversations. Then I want you to come back and write about your experiences, how things went, how things felt differently, if things went better, worse, whatever.